Ooh. What's up, everybody? Anyways, it's Coach Mills here coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down how you can get godlike aim in Valorant with no BS. I'm not going to be including a lot of complicated tips or tricks, just the exact things that you need to work on in order to obtain that coveted godlike aim. But go to the GameLeap website right now if you want in-depth Radiant guides, advanced VOD reviews, agent courses, weapon guides. I mean, we really got it all on the GameLeap website. So do yourself a favor, go check it out. The link's down below. But without further ado, let's jump into the video. Now, if we're gonna start with anything, we have to start with sensitivity. And a lot of people are just, setting themselves up to fail right off the bat because they're picking a really poor sensitivity. I'm not gonna bore you with a bunch of different numbers, but what you need to understand is that when you're aiming in Valorant, you should be using the 3 zones of your arm. And what I mean by that is your fingertips, your wrist, and the arm itself. And the reason that you do this is it gives you different amounts of control over different types of aim in game. As an added benefit of having a reasonable sensitivity that doesn't just use your wrist and fingertips, you will also be not putting the bulk of the pressure for some of the larger movements on your wrists, which can lead to wrist decay and severely cut not only any potential esports career, but just your enjoyment or your ability to play games, period. Now, on top of that, the next thing about sensitivity is just to stop being a copycat. You are not going to be your favorite pro player just by copying their sensitivity, and every single person is going to be different. Finding your sensitivity is going to be very subjective, and it's going to be something that you're going to have to tweak, test, and tweak to find whatever you deem your perfect sensitivity is, and then you can carry that with you to whatever FPS game you go to in the future. Now, that being said, when you first change your sensitivity, remember it's going to take quite a bit of grinding for you to fully get comfortable in said sensitivity. So a sensitivity could be right, but if you don't give it enough time, if you don't try it out long enough, you might never fully adjust to what could have been your perfect sensitivity. Now, the next thing that we need to talk about is the right crosshair. And I'm not going to go into a lot of specific details here because everyone's crosshair, even at the pro level, is different, but they have some things that pretty much all of them have in common. The first thing is that they're small and that they're either a dot or a cross. Now, they could be different things if we had more tools like circles and different things like that, but in the current editor of Valorant for crosshairs, you typically only see either a cross without a hole in it, a cross that has a slight hole in it, or just a dot, and those are pretty much the only 3 types of crosshair you see. On top of that, you are not going to want any movement inaccuracy or any recoil inaccuracy on your crosshair. Very important. Yes, you can keep these on if you're like a really new player, but after you played more than like 10 hours, just turn that off. And then last up, we got to talk about the colors for a crosshair. Remember, colors are subjective to your personal preference, but on certain maps, certain crosshairs are going to be absolutely bad because you got to understand a crosshair is all about the contrast between the foreground, the character that you're trying to shoot, and your crosshair itself. Now, to give you a legitimate example, think of a blue crosshair, the cyan crosshair that you could pick in Valorant. Now, on Bind and Ascent, where there's a lot of like orange, deserty type colors, that crosshair is absolutely amazing because of the contrast. But if you try that same crosshair on Icebox with the snow and the blue, it just looks absolutely terrible, and it's probably the worst crosshair you could pick, with maybe a white crosshair on Icebox being a close second. Now, that being said, maybe you could constantly switch the color, or you could just pick a color that is useful on all the maps. My personal preference is red, but maybe you don't like red because it blends in with some of the blood that happens when an enemy gets gooshed. I don't know, but it's all personal preference. Like I said, just think about some of the fundamentals that I'm telling you here, and you're gonna be sure to find that perfect crosshair. Now, the next thing that you absolutely have to do, and this is so important, and people think that they already know how to do this, but they really don't, and it's counter strafe practice. And this is what you need to be able to do. You need to be able to swing an angle, counter strafe, stop, and fire, and be perfectly accurate every single time. Your bullet goes exactly where you're aiming, but that's not the way it is. If you're in any low rank, if you're not already to diamond or beyond, I can guarantee you that a lot of the percentage of the time, your first couple of shots or even your entire clip is not really going where you're aiming because you haven't perfected counter strafing, you're not stopping fully, and you don't have this tactic mastered. Now, that being said, I'm not gonna blame you because a lot of the ways that people are training, whether it's with aim trainers or just shooting at bots, doesn't really teach you how to wrap around an angle or swing an angle and fire. You're only gonna really practice that in game, and you're not going through enough gunfights to really nail this down to 100% consistency. Now, in my personal opinion, the best way to practice this is just to go to any room or wall in training or in a custom games, and what you're gonna be doing is you're gonna be walking to the right, you're going to counter strafe, shoot one bullet, you don't even have to move your actual mouse, you're just moving your feet here, then you walk to the left, you counter strafe, shoot another bullet on the wall. You do that again and again and again, and you're making like 5 or 6 feet apart, right? You're making a dot on the wall, and ideally, that dot should be in the exact same spot or very, very close to it every single time. So you have one dot on the right and one dot on the left, like 5 or 6 feet apart, and you're doing this over and over and over again, and this is practicing your counter strafing, right? And then as you get that better, as you're doing that consistently, none of your bullets are going off in a random direction, you close the gap between the 2 dots. You make it to where now it's only 3 feet apart. Right, left, and then now all of a sudden you're doing 1 foot apart, and your dots are literally right next to each other, and you are being forced to counter strafe over and over and over again. Eventually, the idea here is this becomes second nature, and you could do this almost every single time in the middle of a fight. You can, you know, run at someone, counter strafe, shoot them, jiggle to the left, maybe even a step, counter strafe again, and shoot another enemy just to give you a little bit of a reposition, a little bit of mobility. This is something that you have to practice, and this is one of the best ways to practice, in my personal opinion, because a lot of the ways that people are consistently practicing is just not cutting it, and you're kind of setting yourself up for failure right off the bat. Now, the next thing that you have to master to get that godlike aim is practice jiggle peeking using your counter strafe and pre-aiming angles that enemies are likely to be in, instantly killing them and, you know, getting that kill for free, and then moving on to the next angle. This is a combination of taking that counter strafe practice that we just practiced and we just talked about and applying it to real in-game scenarios and not just shooting at a wall, right? You want to actually shoot at people. Now, this is an absolutely amazing thing that you need to learn because you're going to be able to basically counter strafe perfectly, and if you have that down perfectly, if an enemy is right there in the angle that you're pre-aiming based on your pre-known map knowledge, then you're going to be perfectly accurate, and you're going to be able to take a duel with an enemy where you just came out of nowhere, you're instantly looking at them, and you're already aiming where you need to be aiming or in a relative area of where you need to aim, so the shots are easier on you. Now, in order to practice this, the #1 thing that you could be doing is going into a custom game with a friend, and if you don't have one, there will definitely be someone in the comments down below that would love to do this with you because the GameLeap community is the most badass community online. And then turn on auto respawn, and one teammate is going to be holding a common angle where one person is typically going to have to check or look at when they peek through default or whatever the case may be, and then the other person is gonna swing around, pre-aim that angle, and instantly counter strafe headshot. Now, you can take turns doing this, you can mix up the angles you're holding, you could practice this on all the common places in the map, because the idea is you can always do this on a dime. You're gonna be able to pre-aim and pre-check all these angles, and because your counter strafing is so good because of your practice prematurely, and now you're putting it into applicable scenarios, now you can start incorporating it into actual games much, much easier because you went through the steps to learn this instead of just saying, hey, run into a game and do this, and then you try to swing the corner, you don't counter strafe correctly, the enemy shoots you in the head, and it's just a complete mess. Now, the absolute last thing that you have to do if you want to get that coveted godlike aim, and you need to be playing more in the game of Valorant than anything else. And I see far too many people grind things like Kovac or Aim Labs 24/7, and they're like in iron, bronze, or gold, and they think that doing this will get them to the rank that they really want to. Now, I'm not going to tell you that these type of things aren't bad for learning some of the baseline mechanical skills and bringing yourself up to a certain level, or focusing on a specific aspect of your aim play that is not quite where you want it to be. However, there is a point of diminishing returns, and I would personally argue that spending that time actually in game is going to benefit your results far more. You see, things like pressure, counter strafing, pre-aiming, crosshair placement, and recoil, plus not even talking about ability use and things like that, are what truly matters in Valorant, and it's not being able to shoot a dot that is just flying around your screen. I mean, that can be helpful for certain specific things, but for the vast majority of scenarios, you're just learning things or wasting your time learning things that are not going to directly affect your win rate in actual Valorant. Now, the truth of the matter is you can get to diamond and even beyond without insane flicking and tracking. If you follow these tip fundamentals, you'll have everything you need, and if you need to later on, you can always revisit things like Kovac and Aim Labs to really practice some type of fundamental like flicking, tracking, or whatever the case may be. But for the most part, this is everything you need to get that godlike aim that will directly translate straight into Valorant. But go to the GameLeap website right now if you want to see a aiming god Tanner and his in-depth agent courses where he goes through every single agent and shows you exactly what he does in his games to dominate and get to top 100 on the Radiant ladder. And we have mechanical courses and pretty much everything you need. So do yourself a favor, go check it out in the links down below. But thank you so much for coming by. That's all I got for you today. I'm Coach Mills, and of course, until next time.